got kind of an interesting one for all of you drama lovers out there. A little bit spicy on this video. So I have had some concerns with PSA as of lately. A little bit different than what most people are upset about and rabbling about, but I guess I would classify this as rabble nonetheless. However, it's taken a spin towards actionability. So it's kind of no secret that PSA grading, I don't want to give the generalization that like it's harder than it ever has been, but what I will say was equally as vague but a little bit different in terms of meaning is PSA grading has changed. So grading at PSA is just a totally different experience right now, and I don't mean on the technical back end side of things. I mean like in terms of the expected outcomes. So what has been normal historically, as somebody who's been submitting cards since 2020, like the very beginning of 2020, pre-boom, I've talked about it many a times because I actually own and operate a pre-grading company called geminspectorllc. I've graded thousands of cards with PSA alone, okay? So I have had plenty of time to familiarize myself with that operation. And, you know, historically, if we just look at like the gem rate on submissions that I've sent off, the waters get a little bit murky because like you don't always send off cards expecting a PSA 10, right? That's not always the case. Like sometimes getting an 8 on a card based on your buy price is a win. So if we just did an analysis of all the cards I've ever graded and pulled out like the PSA 10 ratio, it would be impacted by that score. So I'm just going to take like a shot in the dark here, which I feel is extremely fair and conservative. On average, I have realized probably a 75% gem rate. Like from start of grading until now, 75% is like a pretty average range, I think. And I think that there's some people doing it better than me. I think there's people doing it worse than me. And there's some people who have never even stepped up to the plate. Okay? So for reference, a 70% win rate looks something like this. Or 75% win rate. That means if I send 100 cards off to PSA, 75 of them will come back as PSA 10. If they're expected to be like gem mint cards. Okay? Being a little bit long-winded in the front end of this, but stick with me here. I'll give more specifics about the situation, which do get a little juicier. So I illustrate this to say a couple of things. Right now, if you get a PSA 10 of almost any given card, it's a value multiplier of like 5x. What that implies is if you get one PSA 10, it's pretty much covering your losses on like 5 failures, okay? So to break even in that type of situation, anecdotally, pretending simple math, like cost of goods aside, you're pretty much looking at like a 20% gem rate gets you close to a break even through that lens, okay? And I know there's some like mathematic nuance to that. But if you're able to break even around a 20% gem rate, a 50% gem rate is profitable, a 75% gem rate, you're cooking. Okay, so that's just kind of how I'm illustrating things for you for this purpose. And is a 5x on a PSA 10 always the case? No. Okay. But all that is to say, like, I know what I'm doing. I understand PSA scale. I buy cards specifically based on their metrics. And knowing that PSA grading has just gotten a little bit more sporadic in terms of expected outcomes, what I have doubled down on is only sending the best quality cards. As a matter of fact, I was talking to Retrospecs about this in like early 2025 because it used to be the case that you had some wiggle room with centering. And I know all the drama about like, oh, well, they changed the grading scale on centering, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you still look at the expected proportions or the expected centering ratio, it's not a perfect card. But what I'm doing at PSA is I'm sending pretty much perfect cards. The most perfect cards I can find are going to PSA, which is a little counterintuitive. Because you would expect the most perfect cards to go to places like Beckett because they have the black label, or CGC because they have the pristine chase. But I found that you have a little bit more wiggle room with those other companies relative to PSA, specifically right now too. So add that. There's like a cherry on top. So all of my like what could probably be black label contenders, if it were so objective, are going to PSA. So I am not sending cards that have a lick of whitening. Like, if it has a speck of dust on it, it's not going to PSA. So, with that said also, PSA has always been very punishing of surface. So, if anything, if there's even a lip on a card, not going. It's not worth my time. So, if we remove surface defects that are observable by the naked human eye and under magnification, and then also remove cards with any amount of whitening, pretty much all we have left is centering, because whitening covers corners and edges, okay? And surface kind of touches edges too. So we're looking at just centering here, all right? Well, I am not buying blindly in many instances. Most of the higher end cards, which I would be sending off to PSA at, say, the $50 tier, I'm buying at card shows specifically. Anything that I would be blind bulk buying is going elsewhere. So I'm literally I'm cherry picking the cards that I want to send off to PSA before I even decide to purchase them. And then I'm pre-grading them again under like professional grade light and magnification. And I'm only sending the ones without the types of defects described, the only X factor being centering, which I'm trying to find, like I am making sure that I'm sending mostly well-centered cards. It used to be the case that you could have like off-centering and a white dot and still get a PSA 10. That is no longer an assumption that I'm willing to make. I'm only sending the cleanest of cards and the most centered of cards. Well, recently, probably 2 PSA submissions ago, I had a bunch of One Piece cards. This Black Maria promo, which if you know anything about One Piece, you have to run, like you have to intentionally try not to get a PSA 10, okay? The cards are typically well-centered. Some promos have like this fraying on the edges, but in a lot of cases I found PSA will actually like exempt that because it's a known defect that's mass-produced and replicated. And so they'll allow the 10s to slide, and that's still happening today. And I can provide examples of that with like a Nami card that I've recently been grading in mass. So they have like edge fraying, and I YOLO'd a couple, and they're getting PSA 10s, even with that fraying, but I try to minimize it. Like I try to only send the copies with minimal fraying versus high amounts of it, okay? Well, anyways, this Black Maria promo that I have is not subject to that at all, okay? Well, they're well-centered cards, no whitening, no indentations, no edge fraying, so what I'm describing to you is a gem mint card, by all measures. I had, out of I think 6 that I sent off in that submission, 2 of them came back to PSA 10, 2 of them came back PSA 8s, and 2 of them came back PSA 7s. This is a card that was released in 2024. It's only been in circulation at the time for like a year and a half. And they're getting PSA 7s without any indentations. I double checked them under magnification for even like inconsistencies in the texturing. Nothing. And I guess to this point, because I'm probably not putting pop-ups on this, like I have too many branches on my tree right now, you're kind of just taking my word for it. But like, again, this is coming to you as a person who's talking about getting a bad gem rate, who owns a pre-grading service, so if anything, this goes against my best interest to discuss. But it's like, dude, you have to try hard. You have to run over a One Piece card with a tank to get a PSA 7. Like, that's unheard of. And so that was weird. And so, fast forward to earlier this week, I got another PSA submission that popped, and I had a 30% gem rate. And I'll tell you this, like, outside of my first ever submission that I sent off to PSA, which, by the way, I did not expect any 10s in that entire submission because it was all, like, mid-era, like level X's and reverse hollows from, like, the Diamond and Pearl and Platinum era. So all that stuff, I was, like, cooking in a 9 anyways because I bought those cards for, like, $1 a piece in a collection that I have talked about on this channel. Other than that one first submission, this is the worst submission I've ever had, and I have the most grading experience that I've ever had. So, the most grading experience, the most astute filtering of condition defects, resulted in historically my worst gem rate of all time to date. And I pray to Arceus that that will never happen again. A 30% gem rate on all ultra-modern, like Sun and Moon or newer that have been pre-graded before purchase and then pre-graded again under professional lighting and magnification. 30% gem rate. So I reached out to Nat Turner. I have a couple other buddies who've been kind of like having some issues with PSA, arguably different, objectively different issues, but similar concerns. And they suggested reach out to Nat Turner. So I did on Instagram. Follow me at geminspector on Instagram. That's the only account I have. I don't have a Pikachu one. But anyway, so he responded saying like, hey, thank you for reaching out. Not really sure how to help with this one. Try emailing this person who actually runs PSA. So I was like, okay. So I sent that guy the same email that I sent Nat, and I said, hey, Mr. Turner referred me to you. This is my issue as described. These are the orders most recently that have been impacted, and I described a lot of the same cards I just described to you for 10 minutes. Sorry about that. Well, I didn't get a response from that individual, but I did this afternoon get a CRC request email from a representative saying like, hey, we are aware that you're experiencing an issue with order number blah, 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 and it was just the one order number, not both. They're like, please feel free to send back any cards, but you have to agree to, you have to respond to this email and say that you agree to the terms and conditions, basically saying they're not responsible for damaged cards, maybe, or that, just because I send them doesn't guarantee that the grades will change. But basically, at cost, at their expense, they're going to be reviewing the cards that I send in. I just have to provide a list of cert numbers and then get the cards in their possession again, I need to double check the order numbers, because the order that I just got, just described to you of the 30% gem rate, I don't even have yet. It hasn't shipped, so I'll have to get back with them about how we're going to facilitate that, because it'd be better if I didn't have to pay for shipping and wait an extra 2 weeks. But anyways, they are willing to review all of these cards at cost, okay? And so that means two things. Number one, shout out to them, because they could have just said kick rocks. I first raised question about the results of this order with the upcharge person, because here's another issue. PSA has changed insofar as it used to be the case, I graded in early 2025, I graded a Japanese Neo 1, so Neo Genesis Lugia, the first ever Lugia card in the trading card game. I graded that in PSA 10 at the bulk tier. And at the time, I sold that card for $800 or $900. It's selling for a lot more right now. But still, it was far past the threshold for bulk. And I didn't get upcharged on that, and that wasn't uncommon. You used to not get upcharged that often at PSA, but in today's world, even if you get, say, a 30% gem rate, if a card is $1 beyond the threshold, or if it's at the threshold number for insured value, they hit you with an upcharge 100% of the time. So we have this situation where we have extremely inconsistent grading outcomes, but extremely consistent cash grab opportunities via upcharge. And so another thing that I inquired about in that email, worth noting, is, can you send me proof of increased insured value? Because I paid for the upcharges, so I need some kind of documentation showing that these cards are actually being insured for more. Did not get a response about that. But they are willing to review my cards for free. So I guess, thank you. That is a better outcome than what could have occurred, I guess. They could have just told me to kick rocks, do nothing about it. So that's kind of where the situation's at right now. And the fact that they were willing to review my cards tells me either one of two things. Number one, this stood out to them as a red flag issue, because obviously they can see, presumably, all of my historic orders. So they can see how many cards I've submitted to them over time. They can probably see the gem rate that I've realized on average. This is assuming they do any legwork, which maybe they didn't. Maybe they just felt like rolling the dice, and if it landed on an even number, they'd help this dude out, and if it landed on odd, they didn't, and I just got lucky. So maybe they're aware that some issue has arisen, or maybe the volume of issues of this nature is immense right now, or maybe they're just aware that they have a bunch of new graders, perhaps, that are being extremely inconsistent, and it's on their radar. So it could be that. That's option number one. The second thing I could surmise is perhaps they're not actually increasing the insurance value of the cards after they upcharge them, and as a way of making me shut up about it, they're agreeing to review my cards for free. That's tinfoil hat. I'm not accusing them of that. I'm merely speculating. But what I will provide to you is one of those two situations is occurring currently. And I guess, like in my instance, I can only focus on the upside of like, hey, thank you PSA for doing me this favor of trying to do a better job the second time. And I could complain and say I wish they would have done their job properly the first time, or whatever. But yeah, just kind of an interesting situation. I'll keep you guys updated on this one. I'm not usually like a big drama guy. Not the type of content I consume whatsoever. Also not the type of content that I typically make. But we'll see how this shakes out. Because there's been some I'm not the only person who's been grading for a long time that has noticed that like things are objectively different at PSA right now. So much so to the point where I used to grade hundreds of cards a month at PSA, primarily when like bulk was cheaper and faster. And now I'm sending off maybe 50 cards a month at PSA, but I'm sending hundreds of cards to other companies. And so that is just kind of like me being a flexible person who's dealing in this space. And then also the cost is increased at PSA, and I'm only submitting a higher tier. So like, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, but I really hope PSA gets it together in this regard. I don't need PSA 10s on every card. That's never what I would expect. And I know that to some extent it's a gamble because grading is subjective. And I'll even go so far as to say that I love that about grading. I'm glad that like grading cards isn't this like objective transactional thing. I know that some people are vying for that, but I kind of hate the idea of having like automated grading. I like that there's a human element because the point of PSA grading at the end of the day is eye appeal. And I think that eye appeal is best assessed by humans. But it is best assessed by humans more specifically that are competent in their job and have the confidence to give out 10s when they're deserved. And so I think that that's kind of just, we're at a weird tipping point right now where PSA is trying to like recalibrate themselves perhaps, or just get their bearings in general. But again, we're kind of at like the 18-minute mark here. I think I've said my piece. I think you guys get the idea here. This is a topic I'll keep you all updated on as this situation pans out a little bit more, or fleshes out a little bit more. But so stay tuned for that one. Fingers crossed, hoping for the best. And again, never would I expect all PSA 10s all the time, but I just expect consistency. And I expect consistency specifically related to the published like standards that PSA is supposed to operate within. Like they give us grading standards. And so presumably if we're adhering to those, to the like best due diligence that we can, we should be able to optimize our outcomes. But right now we have this weird X factor that is immense consistency swings. Like how does someone who, like I've had 100% gem rate submissions before. I've had all the 90% gem rates. I've had all the 80% gem rates. But this 30% one, with the peak amount of grading experience that I've ever had in my life, with the highest standards in pre-grading that I've ever had in my life, really weird. And on that note too, like I'll touch base on this whole gem inspector thing too, because I literally run a business for pre-grading cards because I know the standards well. When people send me differentiated orders asking for like, make a PSA stack, make a CGC stack, and make a non-gradable stack, for months now, I've been in business for going on 2 months with Gem Inspector. Since the first order, which came via Danazard TCG, shout out to him, close friend in the or a good friend in the hobby. The PSA stacks have been so small, so small. And I'm not even considering like value, I'm considering the grading scale. And the PSA stack has been just so low because it is less predictable. You have less control over the outcomes at a company like that currently than you do elsewhere, like at CGC. So just kind of a weird situation, and I hope that the pendulum swings in a more positive direction, and I hope that we're able to kind of like recalibrate and catch our bearings in the space right now, because I genuinely do appreciate like being able to grade and utilize via PSA. They're a good company, and their label does carry the most value and the longest standing rapport in the space. But none of that matters, especially like specifically from a fiscal sense, if you're just sending your cards off to a void of like unpredictable X factors. And so hopefully we can limit that. Hopefully we can get back to like a little bit more consistency, a little bit more predictability as far as graders actually adhering to the standards and not being so afraid to give 10s. So we'll see how it shakes out. I'll keep you guys updated. Thank you for watching this. I know it's a longer one. Please like the video, subscribe, share it with your friends if you feel so inclined, and I will see you on the next one.